Hello and welcome to On the Kerbs. I'm your host, Team Albus Daily. Joining me this week is motorsport performance coach Sabine Tyrvainen. We caught up recently to chat about how the combination of motorsport and psychology ended up with her working at the top level of racing pretty quickly, how that then led to her helping New Zealand's Olympic team, the challenges to embracing mental health in motorsport today, and much more. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Hi Sabina, thank you very much for being here today. First of all, how are you?
Yes, thank you for inviting me. I am very well, thank you, and I'm enjoying the UK summer at the moment. So yes,
make the most of it while you can.
Exactly.
So
Don't miss
first
it.
question I like to ask everyone I talk to when I get them onto this podcast is, what first got you interested in motorsport?
Yeah, I mean, as women ask me that quite often. How did I get started in motorsport? Well, my absolute earliest experience that I remember, I was only 3 years old. And at the time, my dad was racing motocross, not on any serious level. It was just low level. But as a family, we went sort of from race to race every weekend. And I remember my dad put me on the bike. I was 3 years old, and told me to hold on to that really thin metal bar on a handlebar and just put me on top of the tank and just went the whole motocross track with me. And there were like really steep parts of it. And I mean, I still remember it now, and I was only 3 years old. So that was a really, that was a really good experience for me. And probably that's where it all started for me. But
So
then
it's quite
later
a vivid
on,
memory.
yes, definitely it is. And then later on, my husband was a professional speedway rider, so I was a very young wife, and so as you can imagine, my dad was quite happy bringing somebody home that was related to motorsport. And as a very young wife, we had very little resources at the time, and so I was part of the team, and I had to be basically everything that you can think of. So I was like the team manager, I was the driver, I was a cook, I was a masseuse, I was travel coordinator, I was sponsorship manager, and even a times mechanic. So I really did everything that was necessary within the team. And it was a very adventurous lifestyle, I have to say. And we traveled the world for probably over a decade.
Wow.
And and basically that's kind of what you say, the real start in motorsport for me.
Quite a start to it, and kind of reminds me of the classic motorsport stories when everyone kind of was just trying to make it work and everyone had to do a little bit of everything, and you kind of became a master of none but jack of all trades kind of thing. So you were good at a little bit of everything.
Absolutely. And I mean, especially when you're very young, you don't have the resources, so you just have to do whatever is necessary.
So I'm intrigued then, where did psychology come into it, and what was it about sports psychology that fascinated you the most? Was it just a natural extension from having had like a decade experience traveling around the world doing a little bit of everything, or?
Yeah, so one of the most interesting parts for me during that time was that I was surrounded by a lot of champions. So I got really interested in winner's mindset, and I really wanted to know what makes somebody better than the rest, and what really separates the best from the rest. And and Speedway is quite extraordinary, because those guys, they really race almost every night of the week, in mostly in different countries every night. And so there's a big demands on them. They race into corners without brakes. The bikes are super light, but really with explosive acceleration. That's even similar to Formula One. So those guys basically have it all. They have the resilience. They really need to have the stamina. They need to have the focus and so on. So they were a perfect sample group for me to really figure out what makes somebody really, really good, and what is the difference to somebody who is not so good.
Hmm.
And that is what really got me interested in the psychology of it. So I just went to university. I'm originally from Austria. So I went back to Vienna University and I studied psychology for quite a few years. And and then I actually did the research within Speedway. So I had this fantastic group available to me. So there was like, I put them in two groups, and one group was the World Championship competitors. So really the world's best racing for the World Championship. And the other group were all elite level racers. So if they did not compete within the World Championship, they actually competed in different countries in the same league. So they were all very, very similar, except the World Championship group was just this little bit even more elite. And I did a research, and within these two groups, and I did some cognitive testing with them, and I tested them in terms of their ability to focus, and quite a few different types of focus, and also like how well they can process information and how quickly and accurately. And the results were really interesting because it showed a clear difference, a significant difference, that the World Championship competitors were able to deal with information as quickly as everyone else, but more accurately. So what that means is that we all have a certain capacity, brain power capacity available to us, which is something that can be trained. And it seemed that the World Championship level racers had a better ability to judge when they were exceeding or really hitting the capacity. So if that happened, they just briefly slowed down, specifically to avoid errors, and then speed up again. Whereas the other group didn't seem to have that kind of feeling for it or knowledge when they were reaching that capacity. So they were more often exceeded their brain processing capacity and made more errors. And that was obviously
why that was then the difference, or was it natural, or was it something that they'd learned over time and it was just because of experience, or was that a bit harder to distinguish?
That's a good question. I think it's difficult to say. I mean, it's kind of this nature nurture question, isn't it? So I have, for example, I've worked with somebody who was a really young rider. He was only, I think, 21 at the time, and he was thought of being a real talent in the sport, and various different teams were interested in him, but he was lacking the kind of right mindset. So he was actually quite lazy, didn't want to get up in the mornings, didn't look after his equipment, he wasn't a very good communicator. So he was really relying kind of on his natural talent. And although the teams were interested in him, they thought that was quite a risk to take him on because something was missing there. And so one of the team managers asked me to do this psychological, like cognitive testing with him. And surprisingly, the results were amazing. So he was really on a top level in terms of his focus, of his information processing ability, his brain power. So my feedback to him was exactly that, he really has, from a psychological perspective and brain power perspective, he really has what it takes to be, the best in the sport that he can be. And that really made a difference for him to get that feedback. And from that moment on, I started coaching him. From that moment on, he really made an effort to develop his mindset and to develop, consistency and really put forward the right behaviors. And so he became really good. And I'm happy to say that he ended up 4-time world champion. So, he clearly had the natural talent for the racing, and he also had the natural talent for the brain power, but kind of the mindset
Just kind of linking it all together.
Was missing it. Yeah, it's about linking it all together. Yeah? So it's really difficult to say, but it is definitely something that can be trainable to, you know, create more brain power and create a greater capacity to focus better and to process information quicker and more accurately, and avoid errors and avoid having to slow down. Yeah.
And from your side of things, you said you went to Vienna to study all of this and then get back into motorsport to focus on that side of things. How or when did you get into the motorsport psychology on that side of things, when you were able to apply that, all the knowledge that you'd learned there?
Yeah. So what was really good was there was interest in the research, and it was also presented at the annual European Congress of Psychology. And it was then because it was in Speedway. So obviously Speedway riders were then very interested in what I could find with the research. And then they actually came to me and wanted to, be coached and guided. And I had one Speedway rider who came to me. He was at the time already 5-time world champion. And for several years, he tried to get his 6th world championship title, which was record breaking. And he was trying really, really hard. He was pushing very, very hard, and it somehow didn't come together for him. Even though he obviously 5 times world champion, you know how to be successful, you know what you have to do. And this time it just didn't work for him. And so he came to me and said, Sabine, so either you can help me, or I really have to kind of give up my dream of being 6 times world champion, and I have to retire before I reach that dream. So I thought, okay, no pressure.
There's a challenge for you.
Yeah, exactly. That was a challenge. So I took that challenge on and worked with him for the whole season. We went together to all the GP races. And I'm happy to say that end of the season, he was 6 times world champion. So that worked out well.
Must have done something right.
Yes. And it's always an effort from a lot of different things and people coming together. And getting the timing right as well.
You know, like you say, it's just having that awareness of what all those things are and how to put them together in the right way. Because, like you said before, already a 5 times champion at that point, but there was clearly something that had either gone missing or was lacking just for that little bit of extra to get it to that number 6. So it's fascinating to try and figure out what that is and put the puzzle together.
Yeah, I mean, very often with that level of success, what happens when things go wrong is that they're pushing too hard, they're trying too hard, and that just kind of disrupts the flow and disrupt everything that needs to come together in order to move forward and really go to where you want to go. So in that scenario, very often it's about pulling back. It's about don't try so hard, because they get to that point of being so successful because they are super analytical. Yeah, they pay attention to detail. They work very hard. They look where they can get the advantage over somebody else all the time. So that is what gets them to that point in the first place. But there is a point where that can get too much, where you then it becomes sort of like your own enemy. Where you lose that flow, and then everything is sort of hard and trying too hard.
And also your work in the motorsport world opened up a few opportunities for you away from motorsports, but also in sports, because you went to New Zealand to help with their Olympic team. And I'm intrigued about this and what made you want to do this, and how did that all happen in the first place?
Yeah, so that's actually a quite funny story, because I was on holiday in Egypt. And it was Christmas time, and actually it was quite cold there. So I ended up watching TV in a hotel room rather than being on a beach. And I put Discovery Channel on, and I was watching this program was on called Speed Science. And it was written and presented by Dr. Kerry Spackman, who was at the time Formula One consultant for 4 different teams. And he was worked in driver optimization and also simulation and mathematical optimization. And it was really interesting program. So I thought, he's doing very similar, even, it's also about developing and optimizing the brain. So I thought it's very similar to what I'm doing. I need to get in touch with this guy. So I wrote down his name on a piece of paper and thought, as soon as I get home, I'll get in touch with him. And then I just somehow completely forgot. And the next thing I heard of him was Lewis Hamilton's first World Championship win, and there was a big spread in the Guardian newspaper, and it said Dr. Chris Bachman, the man behind Lewis Hamilton. I thought, that's the guy. So that kind of prompted me to get in touch with him, which I did, and I heard back from him straight away. And so he was writing a book at the time that we actually became business partners very quickly. I sent him my research results, so he sent some drivers to me for assessment and testing. So we became business partners really quickly. And then I think at the time he was working for McLaren, yes, and he then went back to New Zealand. He's originally from New Zealand. And he had this idea of taking the philosophy of motorsport, which is basically objective data, so measuring everything, and take that philosophy into Olympic sports. So he started a project in New Zealand, which was like quite secret squirrel project and funded by the New Zealand government, to help potential gold medalists at the Olympics to help them perform and optimize. And so he asked me to be part of the team, which we were just a very small team, I think 4 or 5 people. So yes, I went to New Zealand and we worked with 3 target sports, which was track cycling, rowing and kayaking. And we developed this really cutting edge technology to measure basically everything and optimize performance. And the London Olympics, that was just in a preparation for 2012 London Olympics. And when it happened, New Zealand was super, super successful. They were per capita actually the most successful country. And I mean, New Zealand is very small, it's just 4 million or 4.5 million. And they got 13 medals in total. So that was super successful. And that was a good project. And after that, I came back to the UK. And from there, the Austrian Olympics, they got zero medals, the Austrian team. And so I thought, maybe they should be talking to me. So I contacted them and said, look, I've had insight like how New Zealand does it, and maybe you would like to know more about this. And they were on board, and I met with them. And
to be fair, at that point for Austria, what's the worst that can happen? They'll get 0 again.
Exactly. They didn't have much to lose. So they recognized obviously that they needed to do something, and they really wanted to close that gap from where they were to to the top. And they put together a international advisory group, and so they asked me to be part of that group. There was only 4 of us to really help with the whole high performance system in Austria. So I started doing that.
There's a lot I feel like I could ask about there. I'm interested with. There's a lot I could argue more about there. I'm intrigued with the sports in particular that you help with. You're saying about the track cycling and the kayaking, and
yes,
it's interesting because they're kind of sports that normally you could see as being beneficial in training for motorsport drivers to help with their stamina. So I'm wondering, was it, as we were saying about Lewis, was it a little bit like going back to basics in some way because you were dialing down stuff, or how was it to adapt to that kind of a different sport?
No, I think because there are a lot of overlaps. Obviously, peak performance is, it doesn't matter what sport you do, the approach is usually very similar. But what we did is the whole objective data approach. So we really, when somebody was on a bicycle, we absolutely knew everything about them. Yeah. So we tracked everything that you can think of. So we had this really lots of data, and the idea was to feed that back to the coaches, so that they could really have an idea of what is going on and help optimize the performance. Yeah, because especially in track cycling, the coach stands there with a stopwatch and that's it. So it wasn't exactly a precise science, and that's what we tried to introduce, to really get the objective data to help with optimization.
And then how did Austria do after you set up all of these kind of exploratory initiatives and kind of really got involved there?
So it took a while. So we really worked on the whole system of the whole high performance system, and they had like different Olympic centers who were, before we got involved, they were all like run individually by different counties and funded differently. So it was there wasn't really a national approach to it, so it was very individual. So we changed all that, and we brought all these Olympic centers together, and for them to work together and collaborate and share data, and to really put the athletes in the center of it. And it took a while, but in Tokyo, Austria got 7 medals, so it's definitely an improvement.
Definitely a step in the right direction.
Sorry?
Definitely a step in the right direction.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
It's intriguing to see that development, I suppose, and that improvement, because some of the things you were saying, they're like bringing all of their resources together in one place, and like you say, measuring everything. It seems, I don't know, to me it seems a little straightforward that you would do that, and seems a little odd that they wouldn't have necessarily done that before. But I suppose if you've got all these different methodologies flying about the place, there's probably potential in thinking, well, if we've got to try something different this way, it can't be one size fits all. But I suppose it is to a point, and then you've got to get specific with it.
Yeah, I think it really comes down to collaboration. Anything in peak performance has to rely on collaboration. And if people are too egotistical for whatever reason, and they want to protect their own data and don't want to share it, I think that's not a good approach. So it really is about data sharing and collaboration. And that is what can make big strides in the right direction. And yeah, you would think it's like something so obvious, but it wasn't there to begin with. Yeah.
I suppose it's one of those things, if you've been doing something for so long in a certain way, you potentially miss some things that may seem obvious to other people because you're just so focused on making this method work.
Exactly. And then it's also, a lot of political stuff going on in the background.
Oh yeah, that always gets in the way, of course.
Yes, yeah. So we try to kind of even that out as much as possible, and really, rather than individual people or funding being in the foreground of determining how the system works, we really changed it so that it's about the athlete, and everything in favor of the athlete has to drive the system.
Definitely. So what have you been doing since then, and what are your ambitions for the future?
So after working with the Olympics, I mean, I never really stopped working in motorsport, but the emphasis was away a little bit. And then I said, actually, I've worked in motorsport now for so many years, like way over 20 years. And I have worked with so many top level competitors, and obviously I have gained a lot of experience from working with them. And I really wanted to have young drivers benefit from it. But in particular, I wanted female racing drivers to benefit from it, because obviously, we have more women coming into the motorsport, and I think it's a great thing. and to lower the hurdles to come into motorsport. So this is when I decided I wanted to work more with women. And so I started looking into it, and then I came across Formula Woman on social media. And that was not new to me, because
You'd seen the original.
Sorry?
You'd seen the original.
Yes, so I've seen the original in 2004. I saw it on TV, and they, at the end of the season, they had like, oh, we're going to do another series, and we're looking for women who have no experience in motorsport, like who have never raced before, who have never had any racing license, and you can apply here. And I couldn't believe my luck. I thought, oh God, that's me. So I applied, and for me, there was an opportunity. I saw it as an opportunity to put myself into a situation to race cars and be on that side of the sport, so that I could relate a little bit better to my clients than I without it. And that was actually my main motivation. And so I applied, and got in, and I raced and had a few podiums, and I absolutely loved every moment of it. It was a great experience. And I was also part, we're racing in Pembrey in Wales, and I was part of a World Guinness record.
Very nice.
Guinness World Record for the most women. I think it was 62 for most women ever having raced in one race weekend. So that was a fun thing to be part of, and I thought it was great.
As good it is for you to have had that, I do hope in the nicest possible way that that gets beaten.
Sorry?
I do hope in the nicest possible way that it gets beaten.
Yes, yeah, exactly. I do hope so too, yeah. But it was a step in the right direction. And I enjoyed every moment of that. And then later on, I started, thinking about working with female racing drivers. I came across Formula Woman, and they just started a new competition again. So I got in touch with Graham Glue, who is the founder of Formula Woman. And obviously we have known each other for a long time, and I said, look, I'm actually looking now into working more with female racing drivers. And he said, oh, that's really good, because we're actually looking for a psychologist. So I thought, oh, that worked out well. So I partnered up with them, and I became their sort of mind coach for the whole Formula Woman project and series and competition. And so that's been going now for a few years, and I think we have a really big community of women.
Do you have any kind of bucket list items next on your list, in terms of, you've worked in motorsport, like you say, for over 20 years, and you're working more to help women get into motorsport and all of that sort of thing, and obviously you had the Olympics on that. Is there anything left that you've not been anywhere near that you'd quite like to have a go at?
I mean, I don't just work in motorsports. I also work now, for example, with downhill skiing from Austria. But I would like to really get in touch with the Formula One Academy now, with these young female drivers. I haven't had a chance to get in touch with them. But if there would be an opportunity to help them optimize their performance, I would be very interested to do that.
No, that'd be excellent. It's a series with a lot of potential, so I hope it can realize it.
Yes. So let's hope we can somehow can make that work to get in touch with them.
Kind of going off that a little bit, and from what you were saying before, why do you think it's been so difficult for mental health and mental health coaching to find its way into mainstream motorsport, and what can be done to fix that moving forward? Because I feel like, if we take F1 as the example, you see some partnerships between teams and maybe mindset coaches or mindset companies here and there, or mental health charities, but it always just seems to be a bit of a flash in the pan event, and it never seems to be, at least visibly, continuously there. And you see a lot of it with some drivers, where, not just in Formula One, but just generally, where they seem a little resistant to it, and it's always curious for me as to why that would be, and I was intrigued what your thoughts would be on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's very true what you're saying. It's just here and there, but it certainly is still not mainstream, which I find really quite surprising. But I think the issue is that still specifically young drivers still focus mainly on developing their racecraft and their physical fitness, but they still neglect their brain. So I think it might have to do with thinking that if you work with optimizing your brain or with a mind coach or with a psychologist, is almost like something has to be defective in order for you to make that step, which isn't true at all. It really is about
it seems kind of curious that would be the thought process, because you think if you're working with a dietitian or a fitness trainer, then there's something wrong with your body if you're using that same logic, and you're just using that person then to help you improve on that. So why would it be any different for the mental side of things?
Yeah, because I think with the mental side of things, it's very emotional, and we often want to protect preserve our self-esteem. And I think it might have something to do with that. Of course, it's not logic at all, because it is all about optimization. And to develop a complete racing driver, you have to develop obviously your physical strength. You have to develop your technical knowledge. You have to develop your racecraft. You have to develop your commercial skills. But as important as everything else, if actually not more important, is to really develop your mind and your brain. Because
I was going to say, if you've got that on a good level, then everything else will be more manageable, because you'll have the mental equipment to deal with it.
Exactly. Because if you don't know how to regulate yourself really well in terms of physiology and emotions, everything can go sort of off on the wrong path, and it really will hurt your performance in many different ways. And really your brain, and Dr. Kerry Spackman said that your brain is the ultimate weapon in the battle for better lap times. And that really is very, very true, because if you haven't optimized your brain and you cannot process information quickly enough and accurately enough, you will make errors. You will have to slow down. So that will for sure hurt your performance, no matter how fit you are.
And do you see that with single-seater racing? I'm thinking of in particular there, where you see some pole position lap times, and you just think that's just an absolutely mighty lap, and the driver is then saying afterwards that they just found this zone or this state of mind that they hadn't really got to before, where just they knew everything they had to do, but for some reason they managed to get into that extra little bit of something, and it just all flowed that extra little bit, and that made all the difference.
It is what I mentioned earlier, that state of flow or that state of resistance. So you're either in one or the other. And the flow really comes from optimizing your brain. So you need to, if you practice something, for example, you practice oversteer over and over and over again to get it really right, you kind of, as long as you practice something and you have repetition, your brain at some point stores the solutions in the part of the brain that then takes over, and it kind of bypasses all the logical, slow processing and thinking. So then you can race on autopilot. And when you're on autopilot, it's all about intuition. It's all about feeling. And, this logic conscious part of the brain, the thinking doesn't get in the way. And when you're on autopilot, everything is precise, much more precise and much quicker than if you use that conscious part of your brain.
And we've seen that a couple of times this year as well. In Formula One, I'm thinking of Alonso in Miami, where he's kind of commenting on Stroll's race, and the engineers are a bit confused as to how he's aware of all this. And because he's just got everything so nailed down, he's able to take the time out to think of and observe other things happening on the track. And then Bottas in Brazil last year, I think, coaching Joe from behind him, often the best way to get past Latifi. And you're just thinking, how are you able to do that when you're also going at breakneck speeds around this track?
Yeah, absolutely. And we are back in that whole capacity again, because when you can operate from the subconscious, from the autopilot, you free up capacity in your brain. So exactly like you said, then you have more capacity, more brain power available to deal with unforeseen things. And basically everything just slows down. So it's not that you necessarily react quicker, you just feel like you have more time to react and to respond, and that makes all the difference in terms of how much information you can process and how accurately you can process it, and the more capacity you can free up for it, and you do that by kind of programming your autopilot as much as possible.
It's one of those things, it makes perfect logical sense, but it's also really weird to get your head around.
Yes, but that's how the brain works.
Yeah, that's why I'm not in neuroscience. That's too much for me, I think.
Yeah, I mean that's just in very simple terms. Yeah, but certainly the idea and the goal is to drive and race on intuition rather than on logic.
I'm intrigued then, for you on a personal note, what's been the biggest challenge of your career to date, and how did you overcome it?
Well, I think the biggest challenge actually is that the racers, the competitors, are actually not aware of their own limitations, and in terms of their mindset and brain power. And that's maybe as well the reason why there isn't so much engagement in terms of, with psychologists or mind coaches, because they're just not aware of their limitations. And so rather than telling somebody, oh, you can do this and you can optimize your brain, it's actually better to show them. And one way to do this is to, again, use data. Yeah, data is king. And for example, I have developed or created a online assessment, which is really easy accessible, and so you can go through different tests, and some are based on how you regulate yourself, how you process emotions, how you feel, and then other part of it is like really objective data in terms of brain tests and how you focus, how you can divide your attention, hand-eye coordination, and so on. And then you get like a full report based on all the results, and that report shows you of where you are at and what you need to do in order to get where you want to be. So that kind of, with data, really gives you the insight, and you can compare yourself to others and like profiles. But
is that something anyone can have access to?
Yes, so I provide that. Yes, anybody can do that. Yeah. So you can go through that, I think, through my Instagram, in a bio link. I'll make sure that is up there. And yeah, so you just get a personalized report, and so that kind of can provide then the insight that you might not have otherwise. And it's all like with graphs and real data, and I think especially racing drivers can relate to any kind of data.
No, definitely. I think, like you say, data is key there, and I'm obviously thinking of Alan Prost as the professor, and it's just kind of exactly the next natural step on that ladder.
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, that is definitely a good first step. If you haven't had anything to do with mindset training or brain training, that is a very good way, because you need to know the location of where you're at right now, because if you put something, a destination in your GPS, you still need the current location
to know where you are. Yeah,
exactly, to calculate how long will it take to get where you want to be. And this is basically the same thing. So you need to you get that kind of GPS current location, and it shows you the path and the tools of what you need to do in order to get to your destination. And that's definitely a first step. And I always believe, you know, you need to put the work in. You need to put the consistency in. You might have natural talent to begin with, but that will only take you so far.
Exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, because in the end of the day, you know, you need the plan, you need the vision, you need the mission, you need the structure, and you need the tools to help you get to where you want to be. So it usually is, you know, work ethics is something that also sets the best apart from the rest, because the champions, they all have an incredible work ethic. Yeah, so nothing is easy, but I have also now developed a very powerful tool to help create a race fit mindset with absolute minimal effort. So it's about listening to something. There's a certain brain technology involved. There's certain strategies involved, and how to set up these audios, how to create those audios. And if you listen to those audio tracks on a regular, consistent basis, it empowers your mindset and provides you with this race fit mindset, and it just changes your focus. Yeah, because a lot of people, especially also the ones that struggle, very often is the case because they focus on what they don't want rather than what they do want. So you can either focus on not wanting to lose, or you can focus on winning. And these are two very different mindsets, two very different types of focus, that each focus actually leads to very different emotions.
And again, like we were saying earlier, it seems like one of those subtle differences, but makes all the difference in the long term, actually, like you were saying, depending on which one you focus. And it seems like something that would maybe be obvious, but because it is so similar to the other way of thinking, it might be missed.
Yeah, exactly, because it on the surface it sounds like it's the same thing, right? But if you're focusing on what you don't want, like you don't want to lose, yeah, you automatically have a different kind of pressure on you. You have a lower confidence if you have that type of focus. You have more proneness to negative thinking, to doubting yourself, to worrying. That in turn has a direct impact on your physiology, so your muscle tension will increase. And then if you and if your muscle tension increases, you can no longer feel the car in the way that you're meant to, and you will start struggling. Yeah, you will start being in resistance mode rather than in a flow state. And when you do that, then you also lose your awareness, you lose your brain capacity, you lose your intuition. So the autopilot is then gone. And so you lose then your focus flexibility, you start making errors. So there's like a whole downward spiral that happens from emotional states just by having the wrong focus. Whereas if you focus on winning, you really play into very empowering emotions. And that's like an upward spiral. Yeah.
Would you say then, just kind of circling back slightly, then that this is, as it all relates back to the challenge of kind of getting what we were saying earlier about the mental health side of things more prominent in mainstream motorsport, do you say it's very much still a work in progress then?
At the moment, it seems to be, yes. I mean, the top level competitors, they understand the importance of their mindset and their brain. You don't need to tell them anything; they know exactly. And I think I think
you have the same with the younger drivers as well, because I've noticed that in Britain in particular, there's a few, or at least it seems like more and more, where they're starting out, and because they don't know any different, I suppose, they're open to trying this side of things, and it's kind of being more normalized. So I feel like it's, and I mean, tell me if I'm wrong or if it's a different experience for you, but it's kind of everyone between those two. You either have to have that world championship kind of caliber, or you're just starting out, but everyone in between is still kind of a bit resistant.
That's probably, yes. And also the younger drivers, they I can see in karting that there is a lot of young drivers that are more open to training their mind. But I think you're absolutely right. Yeah, is that the ones in the middle that are probably a bit difficult to get. Yeah, but
arguably the people who could use it the most.
Yeah, probably, yes. I think you're right. But also there is for example, Lewis Hamilton has done a masterclass on the winning mindset. So this is a really interesting masterclass. You can also find it on my bio link on Instagram. There's a link to it. So that's something I would suggest. It's a very very good way forward for somebody to learn more about it, because you need to find the inspiration. Yeah. So it's very important to have your heroes and to have your mentors, and to see what have they done, what are they doing, and anybody who has what you want to have, copy them. Yeah, see what they have done, see what their mental training regime is like. Yeah, listen to them, read biographies, watch masterclass and so on. So this is the way to inspire yourself and educate yourself to get more of what you want, and get more of what those people have that you admire and that are your idols and heroes. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel, just copy whatever works.
Exactly. And I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier. It's by maybe leaning into the side of things, people go a bit too far and maybe overthink it then, and it gets too far in the other direction. And it's like it doesn't have to be as complicated as you might make it out to be. It's actually, like you were saying, there's some things where it seems obvious, but there's these subtle nuances there that, like, oh no, you just have to think slightly differently. It doesn't have to be a complete revolution.
Yeah, and I think that overthinking is a big issue. Yes. And it is finding, but it's also it's a very individual approach. So yes, you can look for somebody, do what they do, copy that, but it's important to find your own individual.
So it's like natural talent; it will only take you so far before you have to do something that's unique to you.
Exactly. So we have, for example, an app that at the moment is unavailable, but if anybody wants to sign up to the newsletter, we will let them know when it's available again. So the app, for example, gives you that structure that I've been talking about in terms of how to set your goals, how to really inspire yourself with motivational quotes. And we use images. So all the goals, you can write something down, say, oh, this is my, my favorite car, or this is my dream house. You can all write it down. But, everybody has heard of vision boards, and, you look at the images, but it takes a step further than that. That's not enough, because again, we're talking about alignment of the brain. So we have different brain modules, and each brain module has like its own agenda. And if they're not aligned, they can actually work against each other. Yeah. So logically, you might want something, but emotionally, the emotional part of your brain is actually not in alignment with it, and works against you. So you have like your own little conflicts and enemies within you, and sometimes that can make life a real struggle. So it is about learning how to align these different brain modules so they start working for you rather than against you. And one way of doing that is using images and creating, like we have what we call 2-minute fixated visualization technique. And you visualize in a certain way, and you tell the story for 2 minutes. Like, for example, if I say, oh, this is my dream car, I have the image of it, but then I imagine myself driving that car. Yeah. I imagine the roof down, and I imagine, where I drive, and the wind in my hair, and the sun on me, and the music blaring, and the roaring of the, engine. So you really make it an emotional experience while you visualize that goal. And through that, you already experiencing it like it would be real. And the brain is amazing, because the brain cannot tell the difference between what is imagined and what is real. Yeah. So if you imagine that really vividly and create all the right emotions with it, for the brain, it's like, okay, this is what is happening. Yeah. So of course, when your brain believes that this is what is happening, there is a whole lot of belief that comes behind it, the energy that comes then into it. And you will, with that energy, you will be much more likely to achieve that goal than without it. Yes, it's like a whole belief system and the whole energy behind it that is so important when you visualize a goal. It's more than just looking at a picture. So it's really about aligning the emotional part of the brain with the logical part of the brain. And when that is aligned, then things really start moving forward and you are kind of in that flow state rather than in resistance state.
Balance, like you were saying.
Yes. Yeah.
A couple of fun non-motorsport related questions just to finish off with then. If you could travel back in time and live in any part of history, when would you choose and why?
That's quite difficult, but I would say I would actually, because I have never known my grandfather. So I was 2 years old when my grandfather died. And I would probably use that to go back in time to get to know him. Mm-hmm. And yeah, have some fun with him, because I feel like I probably have inherited quite a few traits from him. So I feel like very close with him, even though I never knew him. So that would be, for me, something that I would really like to do, to get to know him better and spend some time with him. Yeah,
that'd be good. And then finally, what's one thing, could be a food or an activity, that you've always wanted to try but you never have?
I just choose one.
Yes, I'm going to be mean.
So I love flying, for example. Yeah, so I've had different flying experiences. So I have flown like a gyrocopter, and I've flown paratrikes, and some amazing locations. And I had a helicopter lesson, and I flew some small planes. So it would have something to do with flying. And probably one thing that I would find quite exciting is to try like this personal jetpack.
Yes.
So I think that could be next on my list.
Very James Bond.
Yes, very James Bond. And if that wouldn't be, probably, what I also like is this wingsuit flying.
Yes.
Which is obviously quite dangerous. And I don't know if they have like a tandem option. I've never really looked into it.
I don't know if that would reassure me anymore or not.
But if there was a tandem option, I would think about it. I would consider it, because that feeling must just be amazing, I think.
That'd be quite a spectacle to see, actually. I'm not sure if they do have them, but I kind of hope that they do now.
Yeah. Well, let's stick to the jetpack first.
That's fine by me. I can work with that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you, and I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today, and wish you the best of luck with everything that you are going to get up to for the rest of this year and moving forward.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks again to Sabine for coming onto the Kerbs with me. I can't wait to see how she gets on in the rest of 2023. If you want to follow her career, links to her socials will be in the description below, so do go and check those out. Join me again next time when I'll be chatting to another famous face from the world of motorsport. In the meantime, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, as well as check out the back catalogue of episodes on the On the Kerbs channel. If you want even more from me, you can listen to me chat about everything Formula 1 over on the On the Kerbs podcast, as well as delving into the world of Nitro Cross over on the Nitro RX Podcast. Both are available wherever you get your podcasts. As for written content, I currently write for Is It Fast and Paddock Sorority, so be sure to check all of that with original pieces released each week. All of the information and links for those will be in the description below, as well as my Instagram handle if you want to go and follow me there. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back soon with another episode.